Hi, welcome to the Nobodies Project Season 2. This is a podcast where I interview creatives about their process, about how they come up with what they're doing, their ruts, their struggles, the things they're afraid of. In this episode 2, I talked to Brent. He's one of my favorite comedians in Portland, and he's absolutely hilarious. He talks us through the pandemic and how innovative he was with the creation of The Lot. Like, we're really excited.
Yeah, but you don't want to be too cool either.
Yeah, I know. I've seen you perform like so many times, and I always suggest you to other people.
Thanks.
Because, like, legitimately, I find you absolutely fucking hilarious.
Thanks,
like,
dude.
you and Amani and Jaren, everybody who Jaren will be on season 2 as well.
Hell yeah.
But everybody who I've had on, I'm not like, oh, well, they're doing really well. Like, I picked up Jaren, and it wasn't because, oh, he just got Portland's top 5 or something. It was, I've legitimately went to a bunch of open mics and found you guys fucking hilarious.
That's awesome.
So I'm super stoked to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. The first question I always ask is, what do you do for money? And then what do you do for art?
Every few months I call my mom and I say, look, do you want me to live with you? No, I do comedy for money. I saved a bunch of money off of the pandemic, unemployment. And so I don't know how much that gave me this buffer. And I was like, okay, I can do full-time comedy for once it cut off in August of 2021, I was like, all right, I've got enough money saved to do 12 months of comedy. And then as I've used comedy for income, it's like, all right, well, still about 12 months. Like every month it stays, there's still a buffer so I can keep doing it.
Yeah, you still at the year. You still got the year buffer.
Yeah,
it's not growing, it's not going down, but it's steady.
Yeah, and if the work stays steady, then I'm like, I wouldn't say I'm comfortable, but it's like, I'm not looking for jobs right now, which is cool. It's been 3 years since I've had to work for somebody else. And
Really?
That's like something I take pride in, because the only job I had before that, I was a popcorn salesman for a company called Popcornopolis. So it was like a city of popcorn. But in my head, I'm like, don't run out of money or you're going to have to go back to Popcornopolis, because that's the only place that, I got a solid gourmet popcorn resume.
Of course.
Yeah.
I was going to ask what you were doing beforehand, but how was taking the leap into, was it, you're like, all right, I'm ready to get out of here, and if I can just make do, I'm all right? Or
it's so funny because I took the leap in like February of 2020. So I was anticipating, like getting into comedy and getting back.
You were planning on doing it before COVID even.
Yeah, and then
came around,
what's funny is that COVID ended up being the reason that I was able to stick with it for so long, because I got like a part-time gig at Harvey's, and then I was there as a bar back for like 3 weeks, and then the COVID happened. So because Harvey's shut down and I was a new employee, I just got to collect like the baseline of unemployment plus the government's, I think it was like $600 for a time.
Yeah, $600 a month, right? Something like that.
Dude,
was it a week?
I think it was a week, man.
Dude.
I think we were making way more money. I mean, I was making more than I was making with Popcornopolis just off the government, like extra. And that stayed consistent because Harvey's went out of business. So, like, if I was still with Popcornopolis, they would have either found a new position for me or laid me off because they stayed a business. But Harvey's went under, so I just got to say,
that was my place of work.
Yeah, I think because it was open-ended for a while. We're like, maybe they're coming back. I don't know. I'm waiting. And so there was a lot of, I hope the Oregon Unemployment Department doesn't watch your podcast I don't think I did anything illegal, but at the same time, you're getting all this money. You're like,
it
damn.
doesn't feel right. But at the same time, you think about how the government's just so brutal to people. You're like, fuck it. We need a little bit.
And it wasn't like I was taking my $600 every week and like spending it. I was like, this is the only time in your life that this will ever happen. Yeah. So you better put it away, keep your budget low, and just run with that, because and so I'm still running.
I mean, I'm glad that worked out, but it's such an interesting thing that the first time ever that everybody's like, all right, they'll just give a little spring break for everybody. Everybody just stay at home and don't do anything. And I think that was good because I think a lot of people just dove into their passions.
For sure.
And thankfully it like led you to doing way more comedy. Were you doing as much comedy as you are now before when you had a job?
No. That's always been like the hardest thing. And I respect anybody who can do 40 hours a week at something that's like, even something that's not challenging. Like if it's just clocking in, clocking out, it's still like a toll on your body, and you don't feel free when you're, punching in, punching out. And so to finish your job that's already draining to some degree and have the capacity to go do even one mic a night or, that's taxing. And I never found a way to do that well. It was like, I'm a tunnel vision. I'm like, I gotta be locked in, and for better or worse, like, that's how it's happened. There was a lot of opportunities in the pandemic, even though it was bad for comedy. I mean, that's kind of where we are. Is like this was the only comedy club for 3 months during the pandemic, and we found ways to still do what we loved, and then eventually the scene rebuilt around that stuff, and now I'm doing more comedy than I ever have been. I feel more like,
because I heard a lot of comedians talk about how the pandemic was terrible for comedians because every club shut down.
Yeah.
But I mean, that kind of brings us to, we're at what's affectionately called The Lot.
The Lot.
And I'll let you just tell that whole story because it's fascinating.
So I guess it starts when the pandemic first hit, because April I moved home to San Diego. I was living in Northeast Portland with 3 different couples, and they all started, and me. I was in a nursery. Like, it wasn't even technically a bedroom. I was in the nursery, and I was like, they were both on. I could hear both of them fighting constantly every night. 2 of them were alcoholics, and every week it just got worse. And it was like 3 weeks in, and I just packed everything and drove back home. And I was like, I remember leaving and be like, I hope I get to come back here at some point, but I really don't know if I ever will. And I lived with my dad for almost 2 months until May. I moved back. I drove back up here. I got here the first night of the protests. So I was in a motel room watching all that go down, like, oh, welcome home. Like, I'm back. But it was more exciting than being just kind of like, it sucks when you live at home. Like, even if it's a global pandemic that causes it, you just feel bad about, like, why wasn't I doing good enough to, like, go retreat to my own place, But came back to Portland, and while I was in San Diego, they did this thing. This guy named Jim Pine just started doing rogue comedy in parking lots. He would go to, like, he'd pick a gym, and he'd release the location right before, like, so we'd all be in, like, an LA Fitness parking lot until the security guards came, and then we'd have to leave.
You just had a big PA system that you were or was it?
He did exactly what we ended up doing, which was he got a FM transmitter and told everybody the radio station to tune into in their cars. That's way more
clever than I thought.
Yeah, and then so I watched this, and they only waited like a month, so there was 30, 40 San Diego comedians out, sort of socially distancing. Some of them, that's the cool thing about it, is that people had the option. They could stay in their car, they could wear their mask, they could hang out with their friends, they could bring their own microphone. And I saw that all, and I knew Portland was not yet in a place that they were like, if anybody was trying it, they're like, you must hate people. You want to kill my grandma, and they're, everybody here wants to tell you, like, what you should do.
It's kind of the charm of Portland, but to its betterment.
There was, like, I threw it out in April or May to the Portland board, like, hey, this is what I did a video on the San Diego stuff. This is what's been happening. Wonder if anyone would be open to it in Portland. And I remember everybody, like,
is this the comedian board?
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, did you go to the government?
No, sorry. The Portland Comedy Board. It sounds like there's like a board of trustees or something. Yeah. No, it's just a board of degenerates that usually just get on a thread and talk shit. But I threw it out there, and I remember the response being like, I can't believe I'm even contemplating like performing for Traffic. Mostly like people weren't necessarily on board, but June came, restrictions were like still heavy, but we could go back in bars.
Yeah.
So there was the curfew. There was like maybe one or two places that would have an open mic per week. And it was very socially distanced, still not a lot of comics coming out. And that happened from June till like November. There was sporadic mics. Sometimes there would be like an outdoor. This guy named Bram used to do them like on his truck bed.
Oh, yeah.
But it didn't get a lot of, it got maybe the same 10 to 15 people. And then in November, the second shutdown hit. And comedy had felt like it was like maybe coming back. There was a couple different venues. It was 3 times a week. And then it was back to wiped out completely.
Right.
And we had performed at Eastside Bar and Grill with the Dirty Angel Entertainment from like June until November. And so I remember it was like 23 straight Tuesdays we had been there. And that was like, they became your family because they're the only people you get to like do the thing you love with for 5 months. And we were like, we're not going to miss another Tuesday. Like, we're going to figure out, I'm going to take the method from San Diego and do it down in Portland. And there was enough people for the first one. We did it in the corner. It was pouring rain. We got a generator from my buddy's friend.
I think I was following you at the time where I saw you posting about it, and it was just like a nightmare out there.
Oh, it was brutal. We got this tiny tent from Walmart. 8 people showed up. My buddy Lucas Gubala ran the sound. He like helped figure out how the transmitter worked. It was like it wasn't good quality at first. It really wasn't great quality ever, but it built. And we got 8 comedians to sign up and perform under that tent. And that was enough to make it feel like, okay, well, we could do it again next week. And the story with this lot is like, I was driving home one day trying to figure out where we were going to do it. And this spot kind of just looked perfect.
Yeah.
It's not in a residential area. But before I invited everybody, I wanted to test whether or not it was like viable. Before I invite a bunch of people, I didn't want to, have everybody come and then we just get kicked out. So Lucas and I came here and we just played loud music for 2 hours and just honked. And we made as much noise as we could for 2 hours. And nobody came. And so we were like, all right, we'll try it again next week.
I love how that's your test, though.
It was a good test.
I mean, it's pretty clever, but just imagining you just sitting there just the entire time.
Blasting me. Not like for 2, but we're just waiting. We're like, okay, maybe a cop's going to come. Maybe somebody's annoyed by what we're doing.
Maybe Amzi gives a shit, but
they're not there.
They're far enough out there.
Nobody heard it. There wasn't even, there was maybe a camp under the bridge, but I don't think those are the type that are going to call the authorities. And so 8 turned into 12, turned into 20, and then the 4th week, this was we were all the way backed up here, and we did a show right around Christmas, I think, and decided to do it from that part of the stage, or we like staged it there, and we had everybody park like a stadium seating and just shine their lights at the stage, and by the time the 8th or 9th week came, we had like 2 rows of cars. And every time we came, we're like, okay, the cops are definitely coming. Like, somebody's going to come shut this down. It keeps growing. And I was ready. I was like,
did you have a whole speech ready?
Yeah, I was like, look, we're not, at least we're not rallying against the cops. Like, we're just trying to do our own thing. Like, I don't know. And they never came. But a security guard came the 9th week. And they work for Glass Lab, who owns this lot and is a workspace across the street. Sure. And he's like, who are you guys? And I gave him like a business card. I was like, we aren't supposed to be here. Yeah. Because I'd made a Laughs PDX website because I was trying to pitch the concept of like parking lot comedy to restaurants so that they could sell to-go orders while we did parking lot comedy so they could still get... Idea. It never happened, but it was the idea. It was originally called Lots of Laughs because it was like parking.
Very clever.
It was a pun.
Yeah.
So then we're like, that's kind of stupid, and then it just became Laughs PDX because that sounded cool. But the security guard, I gave him my stuff. I was like, tell the owner, like, we're here just doing comedy. The owner called me the next day, and he was like, you guys have permits or insurance or anything? I was like, no. He's like, you guys can't be there. And so I called him back, and I was like, can we just do one more Tuesday? Like, because it's been very special to the community. Can we just do like one to go out with a bang? And then I called a couple TV stations. Or I knew a guy who worked at a TV station, Robbie Sherman. His girlfriend's an anchor, and she passed it on to her news director. And they liked the story. So they came out on our last night and covered the whole thing on KGW. And they did it with this whole pitch, like, and this is their last one, so they're kind of looking for places to go next. And it was a great story. It got nominated for an Emmy Award regionally, which was cool.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It didn't win, but it was cool.
Hey, I'll take a nomination.
Yeah, they got to go up to the awards ceremony or whatever. Kathleen Cook was the reporter. She did a great job. She's great. Yeah. And then the next day, we had like 3 or 4 different venues call us and be like, hey, saw your story. Like, come on down to Beaverton. We don't care about the pandemic. Like, and so from there, it just kind of rolled. The owners of the lot called me, and they were like, one of the manager, her son works at Helium as a security guard. Oh. And she's like, I saw this story. I know how important it is to the community. Like, you guys being there is probably like safer than just it being wide open for people to come, do drugs and stuff. And she's like, so we don't mind if you just use it. And so we got to use it for the next, it was a total like 25 weeks. We were there from November 2020 till May of 2021. And then things had come back enough that parking lot comedy, and it was a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
So that was the end of that. We did my birthday roast here in September, and then we were like, there was like a fight at the end of the roast, and I was like, well, we're never coming back here.
Like a fight?
Almost, yeah. And then that was the end of the lot. But every once in a while, I'll still come back here just to remember, like, I'm very grateful, like, for how that all played out and what it spiraled into, and how, like, many friends is a tough word. How many close relationships with comedians I've had. Yeah. I think, everybody's to a degree. It's better to find friends. I don't know. That's a tough
It's a pretty hard pitch. It's better to find friends than...
It's better to find friends. I don't know if, like, comedians are the best friends.
It's just finding your community. Yeah, and just connecting to it.
But it was cool. It was cool to connect with a bunch of people, and it's led to a bunch of different opportunities. So it has a special place in my heart.
So many comedians probably share the same thing, that especially during the pandemic, got the opportunity to come out and actually perform.
Ben Harkins one night here, he was drunk, but he was like, "This is the coolest thing since Facebook."
Yeah, no, that sounds about right.
It was cool. It was a good compliment.
I mean, the actual spot, we're in a parking lot, but the actual spot it's kind of aesthetically pleasing in its own right.
Especially at night. Like, you got the whole city backdrop behind you. You know how Helium has their whole, it looks painted like that? Thing? Yeah. I would always be like, we got the real thing right here, Yeah. But it did not compare. Quality of comedy was low. Like, you're honking instead of laughing.
How does that affect you as, like, a comedian?
It's you don't ever get used to it. Like, but you kind of sometimes get off and you're like, oh, that one got a lot of honks. Like, that joke got some big honks, and sometimes just your pacing would get a honk because people would be polite and they're like, oh, he wants a laugh there. But if you told us a joke and immediately like 6 cars were like honk honk, you're like, that was good. But
it must be so much harder to read, because a laugh is like, it's involuntary. So you're like getting somebody on that. Like, obviously there's some fake laughs to it, but with a honk, nobody's like involuntarily like, and I guess a little bit. But that's reading the room, I guess, is...
You could tell different fake honks from real honks as you did it, and like, that's bizarre. That's just a bizarre thing to even...
Like, that's the knowledge that it's like, this is my profession, and I know honks.
There were a lot of comedians who had been doing comedy in Portland for a long enough time that they were like, nah, I'm not doing that. And I can't blame them. There were also a lot of those people that came out and were like, if this is the best we got, I love comedy enough, I'm going to do it. Yeah. Some people even came and tried it and were like, not for me. I can't blame anybody who didn't love this form of comedy, because it was
bizarre.
It was a fraction of what you'd get. But people were here for that drive-in feel, that like, oh, you still get to see your friends and have a beer and like do the thing for 3 hours a night that we used to do every night, and now we do every night again. But there was a good energy, and then from that, there was like kind of this. There was like trauma bonding. You became like a family. Everybody who came here and like made it through the parking lot, like really just wanted to do comedy. They weren't people who wanted to stir up shit. And so the scene had a nice like nucleus from that. People who just cared about the craft and the community and building and adding shows and adding mics and seeing, oh, Tuesday there's only one. Well, let's get one Tuesday. Now let's have 3 mics on Tuesday. Like the schedule, people stepped up for sure.
Yeah. No, it felt like it really brought in the people who are the most passionate about comedy, kind of like what you said, where it boiled it down to like, if you love comedy enough, you're probably gonna be here. And
that's not to say the people who weren't here didn't love comedy.
Right,
I think that people had different standards, and then what it did is it kept, like Laughs PDX became the website for mics and shows, so that anybody else who loved comedy moving forward had a place to. I mean, it set the framework for where we are now. But those sites existed beforehand, too, so I don't want to play it up too much that we did anything that had never been done before. It was just timing worked out, and people got on board with it. Because if I had the idea and only like 3 or 4 of my friends came and no one ever got on, like it didn't build, and we would have stopped it after 2 weeks. But because every week there was new people, it was like exciting to go, and this is his first time at the lot, like you know. Do
you have a favorite show at the lot? Was it the roast? Was it maybe the one that you had the news come out?
I think the news one was probably the most fun because there was 40 comedians that got up that night.
Oh my God.
From there, it didn't have. It was weird once they were allowing us to be here. It did for
like
me. It lost the
friction,
cool for me. Yeah, it was like when your parents are like, let you start drinking at the house. You don't want to play beer pong with your friends there anymore. You're like, I guess.
Yeah, you want some risk.
Like, there was this whole thrill,
little adrenaline with it.
Yeah, when you came home every night and you're like, we got away with it. It just felt better than being allowed here, but. It still was a necessary thing for that amount of time, but I think it might have peaked the night the news was there.
Yeah. Plus, it was a big celebration, everything like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some crazy. Like we had a New Year's show here where we set off fireworks and like.
And at that point, you're like, "Come on, somebody shut us down." You're just trying to get people to shut you down at that point.
No, we were just convinced like. This city had bigger issues than a parking lot comedy show.
Yeah.
We would have people. One time, somebody like drove by to stop to text somebody, and I thought that they were coming here. Like every time a car would come up that I didn't recognize, I would go immediately over and be like, "Hey," just to try to like smooth things over.
Yeah.
And she was like. I was like, hey, are you here for comedy? She's like, what? No, I was just texting. And then I explained what was happening. And for the next several weeks, she and her friends came and like would watch. So there were a few real people that would come. I say real people, non-comedians that knew about it that would come and they would be like, they'd ask for the list of comedians. And like, It was cool. They'd park backwards and sit with like blankets and open up their back. It was like the drive-in thing. And, I do kind of wish we had tried to publicize it more at a certain point and like do real shows where we're like maybe letting a bunch of people but it was for us, it was for the community, so that's okay.
Yeah, and with Laughs PDX coming out of it, I know that's like a big place for a lot of people. Like I heard about that before I heard about you, and I was like, oh, Brent runs it, and I was like, oh, that's very cool.
And now I don't. So it is. Better. I have transferred it. I did 2 years, and it was great. And but it's hard to keep track of every change in the city and things that. And so I passed it on to somebody who has a little more energy and ability to do that. He has bigger ideas. As Reese Hendrick is his name. He's already added like a podcast page. He's added a blog. Like I kept it simple, mics and shows, so that I didn't have to do too much.
Yeah.
But he wants to take it to the next level. I'm all for it, and
Awesome.
It'll be cool to watch that grow.
Awesome. We're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll get into some more stuff. Cool. We're back, and we're gonna talk way more just about Brent as a person. So the first thing I always like to ask is, what's your worst rut you've ever been in? Like, and how is your writing process? Are you I sit down and I write like Ben Schwartz, or are you like more Kyle Kinane, where when it comes to you just write it down?
Let's see. Which one of those should I unpack first? You asked a process question, but I'm still thinking about the darkest days of my life. My biggest rut.
Let's do rut. Yeah, let's get into the rut, and then we'll go into the writing process.
When I moved to Portland, I didn't do comedy for a year and a half. I moved.
Were you doing comedy before?
Yeah, in San Diego, and I wasn't having fun. It was miserable. I was young, and I was probably focused on the wrong things, but I was around a lot of people who were very funny and very good and hungry, and they didn't respect me at all, and they made that clear in different ways, and some of those ways were just like shitty, and like, you know, I remember one time somebody called me out in front of like at a hang with a bunch of other comedians, and they were talking comedy, and they go, You're not a real comedian, you know, like we're real comedians. You're not doing this like we're doing this or whatever. And even if that was true, it made it hurt, you know?
Just mean.
It hurt, and it was like trying to defend that. I still have it in like.
Yeah, do you still have the little chip on the shoulder about that?
Sure, where you're like, am I doing this fully in the way, like, you know, and being underneath that wave of people who knew what they were doing, knew what they wanted, and were getting there, I just felt like I was never going to get to that level, and so I needed to change. I was living part-time with my mom and part-time with my grandma doing popcorn in LA and San Diego, and like saving money, but it was just miserable.
Yeah.
So I needed to change, and I was like, I visited Portland once, and I really liked the city. It spoke to me in some way, like that Portlandia energy, not the energy that's here now, but that whole like, move here, be weird, be yourself, and wake up at noon, you know, like,
yeah.
I was like, I want
Great place
that.
to retire.
I want that. I want to retire at 27 or whatever. And I remember everyone in San Diego was like, you're going to get depressed. And I was like, I'm miserable already. Like, they've got more bridges. Maybe that'll work. And when I moved up here, I did one open mic because I was like, oh, maybe it'll feel different. And it just didn't feel right. And so for the first year and a half I lived in Portland, I was just selling popcorn, coming home, getting high, and playing Hitman 3 or whatever version of Hitman it was. I was just speed running this video game, playing the same video game, seeing the same roommates, not leaving the house, only going to Costco to sell popcorn. And that was probably like the combination of leaving San Diego and getting to Portland. The biggest rut was somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And then like November 2019, I went to Seattle International Comedy Competition that my buddy was in the semifinals for in Longview, Washington. And I met Adam Posse and a couple like Portland people, and the seed was sort of planted, like, maybe I could get back into this, because my buddy was from San Diego. He made the semifinals, and his set was decent, but I was like, I could do that. I hope he doesn't watch this. He's a good dude. He's no longer doing comedy, but
free real estate.
Like a week later, I shaved my head because I had hair before that. I did mushrooms, and I got these joke ideas about being bald, and I was like, I'm gonna go to an open mic tonight. And so I went to the Space Room. Sam Whiteley was hosting, and honestly, the rest is history. Like, I was back, and it felt different, and it felt like the people I saw in Portland, that like every local scene kind of has similar figures, like the cool kids, this bit. And I was like, just keep your head down, do your open mic sets, and let people come to you if they like what you're doing.
Yeah.
Instead of like in San Diego where I felt like I was like, who's the big person? I want to go, oh, what can you teach me? Like I just have always since coming back into Portland, it's like, let the comedy be the thing that guides it all. Don't try to, win somebody over, win the bookers over, see who's, got all the spots is like, and that's been a great, that's been the difference in Portland comedy versus San Diego comedy, and the rut almost stopped me from doing it altogether. But yeah. Process-wise, should I answer that?
Yeah. No. Yeah. I had a follow up with the rut.
Follow up with that. Go with the rut.
Yeah. The rut's always interesting. That it was like a year and a half, and then as soon as you got into comedy again, you just started writing more. I mean, mushrooms. I mean, we all know that does help.
It was a perspective thing. I had to let go.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. I grew up a little. I think when you live. Because I grew up in San Diego. Okay,
so it's a hometown feel. Like you need to get out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, when you are in your hometown, people have this expectation of you because they've seen you grow up your whole life. That this is who you are. Blah blah blah. You don't have a lot of freedom to reinvent yourself. Yeah. Because there's all these people, and you go to a city where you don't know anybody. You can kind of play with some things you've always wanted to like. Be or try or like it was freeing to come up here and kind of let go of comedy, see how miserable things can be if you don't have anything, no purpose or whatever. And I guess I could have decided to be like, oh, I'm gonna be a massage therapist and go, that's my purpose now, and I'll join the massage therapy community, and when they ban massages, I'll make a parking lot massage, whatever. Whatever it was, I'm glad it was comedy, but I needed something to grab onto to like give my life purpose, to just have a reason to get out of the house, and that's been comedy. That's why I love comedy. It's like a game, It keeps the calendar filled. It keeps new, exciting, random experiences.
It kind of always feels fresh because every set, like you can never do literally the exact same set because maybe the crowd's different. There's so many different factors. I'm sure that's true with most things, but comedy does really seem like every single set could be wildly different.
Right, and you're always trying to have the same result. You're always trying to have it go well, but you're factoring in those different variables. Okay, I got to move that up there. This room doesn't like woke jokes. This room doesn't like gay jokes. So how do I, you gotta read all that stuff. And
how is it? You talked about it, reading honks when you're here, but how is it like reading a room, and how much does like a comedian set change if it's not going well? Like if you're bombing, do you have like, okay, I know I'll have a fail-safe joke, or like how do you read rooms and how do you adjust on the fly? Or do you I'm just going to do my set and hope to God people like it?
Yeah, I love comedians who are unapologetic. They come in and just do their shit no matter whether the audience is like there for them or not. I'm always trying to give the people what they want, and that's, I wish I just stood by some principle and was like, this is me and this is who I am and this is what you're going to listen to, this is my message. But like my main message is like, I want you to laugh. So if like you're a redneck, I'm not going to talk about how like why aren't there more black people in this room, like, well, sometimes you can say that and it's funny, but like I'm not going to make people feel guilty for who they are,
right.
If that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you're there, like they're there to see a show.
That makes it sound like I condone racism, whatever I just said.
Yeah, it's like if people are racist, like, no, I'll be racist for you.
I just believe that a great joke can make anybody laugh regardless of what they're bringing into the show.
Yeah.
This is what would happen in the lot, by the way.
Nice.
So you would get an extra minute if the train came through during your set, because you probably have to
address
and address the train. Yeah.
Speaking of shit like that, Are you somebody who loves doing? Right now, I feel like every comedian is just trying to get crowd work and just like do that because it hits on the algorithm.
For sure.
How are you with that? Like most of your reels I've seen are not. I mean, you have one joke that involves the crowd with doing drugs with your parents and stuff. Great joke, but it's not necessarily crowd work.
There was a woman last night, first time it's ever happened, who said that she did meth with her dad. Like, whoa. Yeah, it's fun. That's a built-in crowd work thing where you're like,
but it's not like, what's your name? Like, I'll riff off that kind of
right. I love crowd work. I think my favorite comedian that I've seen in Portland is Jake Silberman, and he's a crowd work specialist. He's got this really patient approach where he's not trying to like hear what you said and then make the funniest quip. He hears what you said, he thinks about it, and then he asks another question, and he might ask like 3 questions before he finds that thing that's very funny. But it creates this very unique interaction, and it's a style that I very much appreciate. Yeah. I like somebody who can mix their material with crowd work, and like maybe they don't come in. Okay. Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. I'm just looking at the time.
No, you're good. Maybe they don't come into it like automatically going, so what do you guys do, whatever. But if somebody makes themselves interesting throughout the process of you delivering your jokes, I think it's almost your obligation to like address this person that's, throwing off the regular set. There was a month that I just did crowd work for a whole month at open mics. Like I go up with no material. That was something I think Jake and Niraj and a few other comedians have done. And it's a valuable skill.
It seems so tough to not have anything to fall back on. Like,
but you do. You have your jokes. If the crowd work falls flat, you could just go into your next joke, and it does. It falls flat all the time. It's weird to be seeking that out for the algorithm's sake, or like recording, just hoping for that crowd work moment. But my favorite comedy is a little loose, and it mixes what you came to say with what those people brought you, and then it fuses that's
very
that's
in the moment.
Yeah.
Speaking of like some of the comedians that you really like, do you have any like inspirations? Like, are there any comedians that not just you admire, but like kind of? Well, what I've heard from most comedians is that your first like 5-10 years, you're pretty much imitating other people, and in a sense, like you're doing your own version of whoever it is. Do you have anybody who maybe you didn't imitate, but like took a lot of inspiration from, huge fan of, and you can kind of see yourself doing some of their style?
Stylistically, I don't know who I'm most like imitating. I really like Bill Burr's jokes. I think like he's somebody who just goes in on how he feels, and like it's intelligent enough. He's not doing it in a way like, and if you're offended, fuck you. But it's like he makes it, if you're offended, you're not listening to this full thing. Like I'm not saying this with hate. I might be saying it with anger or with emotions, but like this is a real point of view, and I bet a lot of you share it. And by the end of the joke, they're like, you're right. We do share elements of that. I think that's great joke writing. I think Louis C.K. does the same type of thing where he's like, he presents an idea and people are like, whoa, but 30 seconds later you're like, whoa, I'm laughing at that. And
putting himself in a hole just to see if he can dig himself out. Kind of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, comedy is like you build the tension and then you break it. You could keep everything upbeat and like a party, and some comedians do that, and some people just want to come have a good time and be distracted by silly things. But I think sometimes the things that resonate most are the things that do create some tension, like most things in the real world that you have to resolve. And if you can resolve it with a joke, that's a pretty cool way of like yeah.
Oh, I love that. Something I like to ask is, do you have a joke that you absolutely love that just doesn't ever work, but you still try to make it work?
Well,
favorite joke that just doesn't work.
Just like a joke as itself, I don't know if I have I'm sure I have several of those. There's like a whole story. I keep trying to make the fact that I have this condition called shy bladder syndrome funny. And every time I bring it up, people just kind of get like uncomfortable. Like, why are you telling us this? And from what I hear, those are the ones that will become great jokes as soon as I can figure out the right way of introducing this idea that I can't pee in public, which is true. Or airplanes. That's where it's the most debilitating. I can't fly past Denver without having like a fucking anxiety attack.
Oh, that sounds great. And
It's horrible.
as a aspiring big comedian, I'm sure that's not daunting at all.
Yeah, or like, that stuff keeps me up at night. But it's a premise, and it's something where you're like, it's vulnerable, it's personal, it's original, and it's authentic, so it should be all the factors that make a good joke if I can cut the tension.
Yeah.
I just build it up right now, and I don't have a necessarily cutting way of breaking that tension yet, and so I don't know.
So it's still work in progress.
That
Not
one's a
something
work
that
in progress.
absolutely bombed that you're like,
there's
I'm
a joke
getting
that I want to work that I know is a good joke, and in Portland they never laugh at it because it's like, it's the fucking worst. Okay, it's the joke. It's done well on Instagram, which doesn't mean that much, but like, it's a good joke. I say, somebody just told me 90s trends are making a comeback, but they got mad when I said that's so gay. And everybody in Portland doesn't laugh because they go, we don't say that anymore. And you're like, that's the point. The point is it's a joke about the 90s.
The Bill Burr, you're not listening to the actual joke.
Yeah, if you're going to get mad just because I said that's so gay and it's triggering, like I don't say that anymore. That's the joke part. But if you think that we didn't say that a ton in the 90s, you're whatever. Like, but then that joke will work in most cities that appreciate like just a joke. But there's certain topics that you broach in this city that they do the calculus and they go, straight white guy doing gay joke, race joke, no, that's not allowed. And you're like, well, it's not racist, it's racial. It's not homophobic, but I did say gay, like.
Yeah. It's about intention as well, but it must be frustrating to have to not cater to different things, but like just know the room. And
the only thing I've done on that one is I say if it doesn't do well, I go, depending on your age, that joke is either a bomb or da bomb, which is like, I don't know. You try. You can't placate everybody though.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break again, and then we'll come back, and then I'll ask you some stuff.
Was that a good segment?
That was a good segment.
Okay.
I like that segment.
Good. All right.
Part 3. All right. Cool. So the biggest thing I want to talk to you about is basically it's kind of the writing process, but it's more like how you think about life. Because I know that with a comedian, you don't clock in. All right, I have to be creative right now. It's like an all-day thing. So like where your jokes come from, how you excuse me. How you think about just, is everything you're doing like, oh, this could be a bit every time you go to the grocery store, like you're looking at stuff, or is it you sit down, you dedicate some time to being funny and being creative?
I think sometimes you feel like, oh shit, I haven't written a new joke in a long time. So sometimes it is sitting down and being like, well, what could I talk about? And that sometimes works. But sometimes you're just out with somebody or to yourself and it hits you. I think it's probably exhausting to wake up every day and go like, where's the joke? Where's the joke? And it's important probably to have outlets that have nothing to do with comedy just to keep your mind like fresh. Yeah. But there's not a firm process. All my jokes haven't come the same way. I'm still kind of refining how they come, and they're never coming fast enough. And so that's how I find the jokes is just, where I can. Yeah. I know once I have ideas, the shower's where I like to like talk them out with myself and like run them, but then the open mics are where that's the best place to do it. And so, there's a lot of bad ideas too where you run them up and you go, no, never mind, not that one. But yeah, always looking.
Yeah. How is it balancing like knowing a joke works well versus trying new stuff? Obviously, you want to try a lot of new stuff, but is it hard to like let a joke go? In the sense of, it works every time, so you can get that little bit of dopamine every time at the open mic if you do that joke.
And that's the difference really is, are you doing it in an open mic or a show? Because if you know it works and you're in a room where everyone is, it's a gym, it's a practice session. Like
those are open mics. Yeah.
Are you going to get anything out of you doing the jokes that work? Probably not. Maybe you could be rearranging them or trying new tags on them, and that's okay. But like, those are all useful for shows where you wouldn't maybe want to try new stuff. But it's like, you got to bomb. You have to bomb, and you have to be okay, like being like, well, might suck.
Yeah.
But that's how you take that idea to being one that works, and then you stop telling it at mics and it works at shows, and that seems like the evolution of the joke. In the beginning you get 5 minutes that works and you kind of hold on to it. You're like, this is my 5 minutes. You want to show everybody I got 5 minutes that works. But the especially in Portland where we're all going to the same open mics for the most part each night, your joke, even if it works on Monday, by Friday we've seen it work 7 times. What else now? Like,
right.
You got us with that one,
Speaking of bombing, how does that affect like your confidence, and then how does imposter syndrome come in to the whole comedy scene as a whole, but just bombing, having that confidence to go back up? Is it just short-term memory, or
you gotta feel it sometimes? Like sometimes it's just like, oh, that sucked, but the more you've sucked like that before and got out of it. So like, I think in the beginning the lows are very demoralizing.
Yeah.
But as you experience them and can anticipate that that's gonna happen, they're easier to recover from. I guess if you were bombing, if all of a sudden you just couldn't stop bombing, that might be a time to like figure out what's going on. But bombing is part of growing. Like some of my best jokes I can attribute to a terrible bomb that required me to go like just peel back some layers and find, oh, okay, I can write a good joke. It's just I had to eat shit first, to be humbled, to realize that type of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like if you just crushed every single night, it's obviously it'd feel great, but I don't think you'd grow as fast as you probably would want. I mean, would you take crushing every single night or bombing every other time?
Crushing every night would be fun.
Yeah.
But I don't think you could crush every night with the same material. So that would take like a savant comedian to be able to just, every room he goes to, he's got a new.
Yeah. I read the Steve Martin book, and he mentioned in there that he would order something off a menu and people would lose their shit because they'd laugh so hard. And that's why he kind of quit comedy, because he was like, it's not that it wasn't hard, it's that everybody would laugh at everything and you couldn't like get that feedback that you needed.
That's my goal.
Yeah.
To get to the point where I go, oh, this is too easy. I guess I'll have to be a banjo player, like that. I mean, that's not actually my goal, but if you lose the joy, I don't know. I mean, that's a weird, not a lot of people experience that.
I think only Steve
good
Martin
for him.
is probably the only person experiencing that.
Yeah, I could go read a menu tonight and it would make me want to quit comedy, but not for any of the same reasons.
Talking about goals, though, what is your goal? Like some comedians, it's, host a late night show. I don't even know. Host a late night show, become a writer, just tour, do anything like that. Do you have any, what's your next goal you're trying to hit, or what's the, biggest thing that you would want to accomplish in your comedy career?
Dude, I thought about this beforehand. Like, there are long-term, accomplishments or things along the way that would be nice to hit. But the truth is, if I could finish this year still doing comedy and enjoying comedy. That's kind of my goal every year. Is
I love that.
Be finished with the year, enjoying it, like getting as much out of it as I did the last year. Because I've seen how like sometimes people lose the spark, and it happens all the time. I mean, even people who are still doing it 30 years, you see them and you're like, is this guy just like, did he lose the joy at some point in this
and now
process?
it's just a job for him. Yeah.
And that probably does happen because you get to a point, oh, I can make this much money. I have to do that. I'm not going to go find another skill. Like, this is all I have. So just to be able, because the accolades and all that, they change constantly. And the things that you experience that are exciting at first. But if you were doing that for 5 years or 3 years, you would feel like oh man, I'm a failure. These things that you were stoked to do. So if you can maintain joy throughout the ups and downs of it, or at least still maintain like a commitment to the craft, that'd be enough for me. If I get to the end of the year and still love comedy, that was a good year. Yeah.
I love that. What about doing things outside of maybe traditional stand-up? Do you have any interest in is stand-up the love, or is it all things comedy, whether it be, improv, sketch?
I hate improv.
Most people do.
And not because I don't like doing it. It's because my roommates are all improvisers, and like 3 times a week they'll have improv class practice in our kitchen, and it is like
I had roommates who did improv too.
God.
And
every time I just want to come down where they're doing these like weird warm-up games and stuff, and I just have this fantasy of walking into the kitchen, like opening the refrigerator, like grabbing some milk or something, and being like, you guys look stupid right now, right? That's like what I always want to do, because obviously improv is about accepting we look stupid, but we do it as a team and we support each other. But if some outsider just came in while you were practicing and was like, God, you guys are fucking idiots, and which is a little harsh, but then all of a sudden they'd be like, who this is a safe space, who are you? And so so absolutely no improv. Got that. I got kicked out of an improv class because I kept suggesting, for the profession, police officer. And they were like, I don't feel comfortable acting as a police officer. But then somebody else would be like, serial killer. And they'd be like, oh, I'm a crazy serial. Like, okay, fine. This city's so weird, dude. They're like, give us the name of a place. I'm like, precinct. They're like, get out of here.
I love the thought of you getting kicked out of an improv group for that.
Yeah. Whatever.
So, no to improv. What about like writing, sketch?
There was a minute during the end of the San Diego phase where I was like, oh, I'll be a sitcom writer. And so I was working on like pilots and spec scripts. So I'm aware of like act structure and like A plot, B plot, so, you know, how it all fits into the format. And that's cool. Stand-up's the thing. Yeah. It's the thing that like, it's so direct, and you get an idea and you could take it immediately. Oh, that's not the right idea, but there's a lot of...
The only person you're relying on is you.
For sure.
Like, yeah, you got to find the right shows, everything, but if you're acting or doing something else, you might have to be like, oh, maybe this director has to have the same vibe, everything like that.
Yeah,
and stand-up, it's you. Yeah.
And I've watched there's a lot of stand-ups who found those other outlets by being great stand-ups, So they were a great stand-up, and then eventually someone gave them a role, and they got to be an actor, or they got a podcast idea, and that came from who they were as a comedian and what they were pursuing. I'm open to. I think we have a podcast in the works. I'd be open to acting in sketches or even helping to write a sketch, but. I think the primary focus is stand-up, and then what comes from that is enough in terms of just opportunities, relationships, everything. It's kind of, I trust that putting enough into stand-up it's sort of that don't put all your eggs in one basket thing. But there's two sides of that. Is like the guys who came here, there's the people who came to war and burned all their ships so that there was no return, like they had to either win or be killed. Like they weren't going to go home retreating. Is like, you got to go all in on something, right?
Right.
Balance is important, but that's at least for most of the last 8 years, it's been stand-up with the little gap in there. So
I was gonna ask how long you've been doing it. By 8 years.
Yeah.
What's the next step? Is it just start hitting the road, or is it moving to LA, New York? Because typically I hear the route is, you get a local seeing, and then you either go to one of the two big cities, and then you end up in LA.
Yeah, and then you end up moving back to Portland.
Yeah.
New York's I started in LA before I moved to San Diego, so I feel like I'd rather go try New York and see what that's
Something
like.
new, yeah.
Yeah, East Coast people don't really like me, and so...
So you just like the challenge?
Trying to adapt to people who are a little more direct and confrontational. I've been raised in cities, then moved to cities that are so like passive aggressively based as far as like how people socialize. I'm sure that I embody a lot of that. And East Coast people don't have patience for me. They don't like when I
Have you done stand up out there?
A couple times, but it's more just my interactions with people who are from the East Coast. They're like, there's just this sort of like lack of they don't really respect me. Like, and I hate that, but I'm like, if I moved there, maybe I could figure some things out about myself. I mean, moving to Portland taught me a lot about myself just in terms of that, like, the wokeness that all the lessons that a straight white privileged man would need to learn. And I don't like hear those and just go, fuck you. I hear them, give them, I appreciate the lesson. I don't like some of the tactics that people use to like, you have to feel this way, or they try to guilt you or shame you into that. I can still listen and take in what you're saying without having to like condemn every part of my being,
I'm in the same boat where it's much more about the intention, not how you do it. And that's I think that's kind of what you're hitting at there. And
and I think everywhere you move has the potential to like help you grow.
But I think getting outside of your comfort zone is huge for that.
Eventually, New York, where it is right now, is like, because I sold Laughs PDX, so I'm trying to move from local to a little more regionally focused, like
nice,
taking more, trying to put more shows in outskirts of Portland, Seattle, all these. There's so many places in the Pacific Northwest that are like 10,000 people, maybe even less. And I think comedy can do better in those cities because they're so starved for live entertainment.
Yeah.
That if you put, if you got like, if you put a show on and it was in a venue that seated like 200 people, 5% of the city might come out to watch your show because it's just like there's nothing to do. Once it's the talk of the town or the event of the night, like that's the only place people want to go. So the model this year is like trying to test where comedy can work that it hasn't been, at least in the last few years. People don't want to come to Portland either. Like people that used to come here maybe to watch a show.
Really?
Yeah, they don't want to go on a date night and leave their car and like walk past a bunch of camps, like. But if you put it in their downtown, where somewhere that's familiar to them, they just get a babysitter, go down the street. They don't have to worry about all the things they worry about when they watch the news and stuff. I think there's a lot of people who used to visit this city from not that far away. They don't want to come here anymore.
Yeah, no, I can definitely feel that though. Like it, because I'm from the Detroit area, and even that, I mean, and we have the worst rap ever. Is like people will ask me like, oh, is Portland like safe? Is Portland like, and it's like you live here long enough and you're like, it's fine. Like it's people are blowing it out of proportion, but the outside like kind kind of attitude people have towards Portland is so soured. Where it's,
but it has it has
merits,
changed.
Yeah.
Like this isn't the city that it was just 3 years ago.
Right.
It gets closer too. Like that, I feel like I see it more.
Yeah.
I don't know. I used to be like, oh, it's just it's just Fox News blowing it out of proportion.
Yeah.
But then a mutual friend got stabbed downtown because he peed near a homeless person. And,
Jesus.
I'm like, I have to pee outside sometimes in sketchy places because I can't pee in public. So
right.
I could get stabbed. Some guy got kicked out of a show on Wednesday and threatened to pull a gun out and pop somebody in the head. And I was like, people are on edge, and you can't. You never really know what the dude next to you is thinking or where his head's at.
Yeah.
But yes, it isn't as bad as some of these people think it is. And honestly, a lot of these small towns are still experiencing their own surge in crime because people are moving from the cities to the suburbs.
True.
It's not like they're this safe community.
Right. It's just familiar, is what it is. It's
familiar,
kind of what we're getting
for
at.
sure. Yeah.
How is social media, especially with how comedians are now getting a lot more popularity just through social media? It used to be the more traditional routes. You do really well, you're a feature, you're a headliner, and maybe you get a 30-minute on, Comedy Central, whatever it is, you get a special. I feel like there's a bigger rise in maybe YouTube, maybe Instagram. How is that whole landscape with social media and being a comedian? How do you balance that? Do you like it?
You have to balance it, because if you just go hard on one, you could do great in social media for the jokes you have, but it takes so much effort. You're going to stop writing jokes if you're just posting reels every day and tracking and editing and stuff. It's like, but at the same time, if you're writing all these jokes and watching other people blow up on social media, you're like, I guess I got to do that too. We're in a weird place with that, I think. I just saw Louis on a podcast being like, you used to have to cater to people, and now you're catering to an algorithm, and that's weird. Those are numbers. And that's 100. I mean, that's true. People are writing formulaic jokes and getting big numbers off of that because they know, Chinese spy balloon. If I do a joke about that and put it out this day and hashtag it with this, 1 million of views. As long as it's a decent joke. But if you're writing all those every week, where are you peeling back the layers of yourself that you kind of need to bring to the stage at some point, to make people feel things?
It really goes against everything that should be, like, art should be, vulnerable. You've mentioned that a couple times. And having you cater to an algorithm just feels so, wrong. And I wonder if it'll have any effects on, how, the next generation of comedy.
It has to.
Yeah.
It has to, yeah. And probably not for the better.
No.
But everything has, it's like a rubber band effect. Something will snap here, something new will come, and, I don't know. It'll be a new social media thing that comes, but the best comedians, the ones that do just focus on their content, if it becomes good enough, someone's gonna end up being like, I need to be your social media guy. I think as long as you're focused on that, eventually someone's gonna connect you with the masses, even if it's 20 years or for Louis, he says 25.
Yeah.
But I definitely say that, but I also do post reels with the intent of trying to build followers. What's my intention of building followers? There's a way to translate that to butts and seats, You start to put yourself out there as selling tickets to shows. People want to double if they've never heard of you, they want to go, oh, okay, he's got this many followers. And so there is a direct way that can translate to new people seeing you live and in person doing the thing that you were trying to do.
Because you're obviously going to take three new people seeing you at an open mic over 100 people seeing a reel, right? But if that translates a little bit to people actually seeing you in person, basically you'd rather have people see you in person than just your online presence, I would assume.
But it's a funnel effect. So like you got to catch their attention, then make them engaged enough to go, where's he performing? Oh, he's in my area. And there's like levels along that. You got to have a website. You got to have an email list, and like all that's the stuff we're talking about. That none of that makes you funnier. But if you're just focusing on being funnier, no one's going to see it. You're not going to get money, and at a certain point, you're going to need that money to keep going, or you're going to have to work for Popcornopolis again. So it's like it's such a balance.
Yeah.
You're not going to become a great comedian on Instagram. You're going to become a great comedian night in, night out at the open mics and the shows. But that is the way you're going to reach somebody in Poughkeepsie, New York, from Portland. So, and especially with stuff like a podcast, those people don't need to see you live. So you need to cast a big net, and
right.
Social media does that. But, social media isn't making anybody funnier.
No.
So keeping those two things in mind, I don't know. It's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But I really like how it's like, just make sure it's at the stage, and that can help, but it's not helping you become funnier. And I think that's an important point.
Right.
One of the last questions I like to ask is, what would you consider making it big, or like, what's your end? I won't even say end goal, but like when you go like, oh, I've made it, I've done anything like that. Is it, enjoying comedy, that's the big one for sure. Making a living off it. But is there any goals you want to hit in terms of like, oh, I'd love to start headlining a tour, like something of those natures? Like, what's the big goal for Brent?
That guy who told me that I wasn't a real comedian, I want that guy to open for me someday.
And you just be really nice and just you don't even remember him. You're just like, oh yeah, you're an opening act. And
yeah, maybe I don't even talk to him or whatever. But or maybe I do. Maybe we're buddies. Maybe I tell him how much that hurt me. But whatever. No, that's not a goal. That'd be weird to be just doing comedy as like a revenge.
Yeah.
But
make for a good movie.
30 years was always like, if I could do comedy till I'm 60 with the same thing of like each year I'm still enjoying it, that's gonna feel like that's what I'm set at. Like, that's gonna require not just enjoying it, but also like living till 60. So you gotta take care of yourself too. And that's sometimes that gets lost in it all. Like, you take every gig, you go out on everywhere, and you realize, oh, I haven't slept like well or ate well in like months.
And living at open mics, they're all at bars,
and you feel it on your body. And I'm 32, and I'm like, all right, I gotta start doing different things health wise if I even want to make it 28 more years doing comedy. But I know it's gonna take that long to be the comedian that I like really want to be. Yeah. So I think it's less for me about actual accomplishments or like monetary achievements, and more like, can I sustain what I've been doing? Because I appreciate if every year is like the last 3 years, it'll just gradually get better, and I won't need to chase anything. And I think your process will get refined every year. It gets a little, you never like nail, oh, that's my process, and I just clock in here to here, and I get 8 jokes, and that's how I get it. It's always going to vary, but sure. If I can continue to do it at the rate I know you have to do it to get better for another 28 years, then that's the long-term goal.
I love that.
Yeah.
2 more questions. If you could be a feature for any comedian on tour, which comedian would you want to be featuring for? Like maybe just get to know that comedian and be on tour with them, or
I think it'd be cool to be Bill Burr's feature for sure. I don't, because that would mean he had to like me.
Yeah,
that'd be kind of cool. There's comedians who are like, they're your favorites, and you're like, would they hear 5 minutes of my stuff and be like, ooh, like I don't.
See, are you would you want them to hear that with the potential of then, like, do you think you're at the point now where, so you wouldn't want Bill Burr to hear your jokes right now? You'd want to wait until you're like, I'm ready for him to give me the judgment.
I would not be sending any tapes to Bill Burr with intention of getting anything right now.
Well,
but it would be like, if he was here, I would be curious what he thought of the last joke I wrote. Like if I could run, because the last joke I wrote is what I think is my best joke so far.
Yeah.
And my next joke might be better than that, ideally. But if I could run that by him, and he had any interest in it at all, then I'd be...
You're just mild, like, oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that would feel good.
I'd take that.
Yeah.
I love that.
For sure.
Yeah, last question is just, if you could talk to the person just starting out, you said you've been doing comedy 8 years? 10?
Yeah.
8 years?
Yeah.
What would you tell them? A little cheesy one, but I think it's fun.
If I could talk to somebody just starting comedy...
Or yourself when you're just starting, or somebody who is just starting.
I guess I would tell them, don't ever feel like you have to do this. You know?
Yeah, I love
Don't
that.
ever come out because you think that's what you need to do, or like don't tell a joke a certain way because just do it because you want to, you know?
I love that.
Or because it's doing something for you, you know? Because there's people who get everything they wanted, and then you talk to them and they're like miserable.
Yeah.
That'd be a shame. To work your ass off, to get the things you wanted, get them, and then be less happy than the guy who wanted them in the first place. That would be somebody who probably took a route that didn't feel authentic to them at a certain point. But starting comedy also, just like, be okay not getting anything for several years, because you or don't even think that it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a quick process at all. And it's like anything. You're not going to start great.
Right. So the key is finding the things in the struggle that are still fun.
Yeah.
And enjoyable or challenging, or like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
I mean, if you've watched this podcast, I love doing the video stuff, but I mean, you watched the first season and I fucked up so much of it, but I love doing it. So I'm just going to keep doing it.
That's like every year you should be able to look back and listen to a set and go, oh God, I can't listen to that. And then the sets you're proud of right now should be the same thing. Like you look back a few years ago, I was proud of that.
Yeah.
But that's the only way. You have to be proud in the moment. That's the best you can do. But there should be, like, and it's never linear, but you should be charting growth, you know?
Yeah, at least taking stock of it. Because, like, going back through my old photos, videos, I enjoy going back through it, but I'm like, I am so much, like, I was so bad, and I thought I was so good. Like,
but you learn when you watch all the other things. You're like, well, this is something that I do that's a bad habit. I can't do that. Yeah. So you do have to, like, reflect and watch your stuff that makes you cringe.
Yeah. Do you like recording and watching yourself, or are you somebody who's like, I put it out there, it's fine? Or are you analyzing? I mean, obviously you go back a little bit, but... I'm for sure analyzing. Oh, yeah?
I do, yeah. I mean, I'll listen to the sets the next day. Yeah. The good ones I'll listen to more than the bad ones, but I'm there's probably like some form of narcissism driving that, but like
stand up has a little bit
Yeah.
of that
So
built in.
I don't watch myself like, I'm like, oh, nice. It's getting better, you know? Yeah.
Like as a third party, like this guy, yeah, he'll be okay. He'll be all right.
Yeah, he's figured it out.
But yeah, dude, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for coming to the lot, dude.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, as the train's going, we'll get on out of here, but I'll plug all your shit and do all that stuff. But dude, super fun. I'm glad you came on.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Thanks, dude.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was fun.